Welcome back to FM Builds. My name is Mike Usrey, and in this series of Project Ron, we are taking a 2003 Miata that is mostly stock and making it into a true driver's car. And in this episode, we're going to be installing a lightweight flywheel and upgraded clutch combo, as well as some under hood upgrades to make it, one, easier to work on under the hood and nicer to look at. So let's go ahead and talk about those parts. Here in front of me, I've got all the parts that we'll be installing in today's video. We're going to start over here on this side with the performance-oriented kind of things. And we're going to start off with our lightweight flywheel and clutch combo. We call this the Happy Meal kit. So this features our 10.3 pound flywheel. This is about 8 to 10 pounds lighter than the stock flywheel, depending on what year we're talking about. So this is, one, it's a direct fit. There's nothing silly about it as far as bolting it up. But what it does allow you to do is blip your throttle and rev match much quicker than you can with a stock flywheel. So that's a really great upgrade for anybody that's driving their car like a sports car should. We think it's a great addition for street cars and for track, of course. Paired with our lightweight flywheel, you are going to be using our level 1 clutch kit. So this features a full face friction disc. It is sprung. It is a organic material, so very easy to use and to modulate. And then that's going to have our level 1 pressure plate, which is to mean that it is basically very close to the stock level of pedal effort. It's maybe just a hair stiffer, but most people don't even notice the difference. The only other difference is that because of the way that we have worked with Competition Clutch to design this pressure plate and the springs, is that it actually holds a ton more than the factory clutch can even think about. Factory clutches might be good to 130, maybe 150 pound-feet, whereas this one goes all the way up to 318 pound-feet of clamping force. So it'll be plenty for what we're looking to do with Project Ron. Now, of course, along with the new clutch components, we do have a new throwout bearing or release bearing, as well as pilot bearing, a alignment tool, so that way we can make sure everything's good and lined up before we stick the trans back in. We also have some new seals for the back of the engine and for the transmission. And lastly, along with the clutch kit, we have our clutch switch override clip. That is this little guy. And what this does is it holds a button down that's on the firewall underneath the dash behind the clutch pedal. So that way, normally you would use the clutch pedal when you depress it with your foot. It pushes the button, and then it lets the ECU know that it's okay to start the engine. This holds the button down all the time, so that way you can start the engine without having to depress the clutch pedal, which makes it handy because you don't have to jump in the car to be able to start it if you would like to get it idling and then go do a couple of errands, fill up the trunk with luggage, whatever. Or another thing that we like it because it also reduces the amount of load that is going or being applied to the thrust bearings inside the engine, because you're not pushing the clutch and the flywheel assembly up against the engine. So it saves a little bit of thrust bearing wear. Besides the clutch and other maintenance items we have here, we do have a few engine bay related items that we're going to be installing just to make our life a little bit easier for this episode and for future episodes. The first one that I'm going to cover here is our hood lift kit. So there's actually two of these struts or rods. They're just gas pressurized shocks, if you will. And they hold up the hood so that way you don't have to use that silly prop rod. On the NAs and NBs, this is a pretty straightforward install. We'll cover it a little bit for how it goes on the car, but in short, this will allow you to lift the hood basically once it's popped, and with one hand, lift it and keep it in place. And it actually raises it higher than the stock prop rod does anyway. My favorite thing about this is that you don't have to fight the factory prop rod anytime you're working on the engine bay. It's so convenient. This is one of my favorite modifications to do to any Miata, whether you like working on it or you like showing it off at car shows. Speaking of showing off at car shows, we also have some engine bay bling to install in this episode. This is our washer fluid reservoir, and basically this gets installed in the wiper cowl area of NA and NB Miatas. And this way you can actually get rid of the stock one, which oftentimes is either in the back far corner or sometimes over the exhaust manifold, or NAs, they're up towards the front, depending on what you have. There's a few different stock locations. Most of them, unfortunately, are pretty ugly at this point. Usually they're yellow. They're also in the way if you're doing a turbo kit and you have an NB with ABS, like what we have here behind us. So we're actually going to be doing this to be able to clean up the engine bay and get a washer tank out of the engine bay while keeping it looking very nice. This does utilize the factory pump. It slots right in. We've got some mounting hardware to be able to install it. And this reservoir is actually designed so that way when it's installed, it is relatively even flush with the top of the firewall. And it actually holds a more capacity than some of the other aftermarket kits out there that utilize like the Suzuki Cappuccino bottle. So overall, this is a pretty slick upgrade and is going to make a big difference to what it looks like under the hood. So now that we've talked about all the parts, let's go ahead and get them on the car. To make our lives a little bit easier, we'll first be installing our dual hood lift kit. This gets rid of the annoying factory prop rod, so that way you're not always banging into it whenever you're working underneath the hood of your car. The first step is to drill and tap the hinges, so that way we can install the ball studs. And then the hydraulic pistons get clipped on, so that way they support either side of the hood. We're going to take this opportunity to clean up our engine bay just a little bit more and install our Trick aluminum washer bottle relocation kit. This removes the factory washer bottle, which hangs out over the top of the exhaust manifold on NBs that have ABS, and it gives us a really sleek aluminum bottle that fits in the wiper cowl area just behind the firewall. This is a really tidy installation and gives us a little bit more real estate in the engine bay for some future upgrades. Now it's time to move on to the meat and potatoes of this episode, which is our Happy Meal kit. Installing a performance flywheel and clutch kit in your NA or NB Miata is kind of a lengthy process, so we're just going to hit the high notes here. The first step is to remove any factory bracing underneath the car, as well as remove the exhaust so that way we can get access to all of the bolts on the bell housing. Next, we remove the drive shaft and the PPF so that way we can pull the transmission out from behind the engine. Out come all of the bell housing bolts, and then we just fight the transmission free. Now that we've exposed the factory clutch and flywheel, those parts also need to come off so that way we can install the shiny bits. However, before we install the new flywheel and clutch kit, we will be doing a bit of preventative maintenance by installing a new rear crankshaft seal, a new transmission input seal, and a new output seal for the transmission. The packing oil is wiped off of the flywheel and then bolted into place using Loctite on all of the bolts. The friction disc is then positioned using the alignment tool and the pressure plate bolted in place to clamp all three items together. Now that the shiny bits have been bolted in place, it's time for the transmission to go back in the car. So everything from here on out is just pretty much the reverse of removal. We start with getting the transmission lined up and then bolted in place. Next, the PPF goes on, ensuring that we get the install height correct by measuring it compared to the frame rails. Afterwards, the drive shaft goes in, then the exhaust, and all of the underbody bracing. The final step in this clutch job is to make sure that the hydraulic system is bled and adjusted properly. So we're going to top it off with some high quality redline fluids. And that about wraps it up for this episode of FM Builds with Project Ron. The new clutch and flywheel is in. We've gotten rid of the ugly prop rod. Now we have these awesome struts, and we have our shiny new washer tank. That way we can get all the extra junk out of the engine bay. Gives us a bit more room to work on the fun stuff that will be coming in a future episode. So we're not going to do a drive to show you what it's like now that we've done this installation, because the next step is actually to go put a whole bunch of miles on it and break in the new clutch system. It's going to be a lot of fun for us, but it's pretty boring to watch, so we'll leave that out and we'll catch up on a drive for the next video. Of course, we wouldn't be able to have this build series without the help of our friends and sponsors: Mazda Miata, DEI, Willwood Brakes, Cypher Auto, Hard Dog Fabrication, Koyo Radiators, and Toyo Tires. Thank you all very much for your support and lending parts to be able to make this build as exhilarating as possible. I'd also like to extend a thank you to our customers and all of our friends in the Miata community. Thank you all very much for your support. Thanks for watching another episode of Project Ron on FM Builds. We surely appreciate it. And if you like this series, give us a thumbs up. Also, if you want to see more of this, you can subscribe and even hit the bell down below so that way you can get notified for when the next episode comes out in the future. And of course, thank you again for watching. We will see you all next time.